Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Soss number 216 IT. This is a template for prepping doors and frames for the Soss 216 Hinge. And here's what it looks like. This is just a piece of poplar, is what it is. A fairly simple device in the sense of, well, looking at it, it seems simple. I would think the engineering of it, the thinking up of it, less than simple. It will include instructions, which we're going to go over. This would be the instructions for an entire kit. Obviously applies to a single template. A couple of nails, and that's what they're intending you're going to use to attach the template to the door and the frame. So first, we're going to do a little bit of a visual tour of the item itself. Overall length, about 16 inch. Overall width, about 3 inch. It's probably 1x material. About 5/8. Not very heavy, being poplar. And this is a great tool for prepping a door and a frame for a Soss project that you'll be doing. I would probably think that this would be less than something that you'll get hundreds of uses out of. It's just wood. It will wear out with time. But nonetheless, we sell these to people who are doing a door or a small quantity of doors or just one house, one smaller project. And a set of templates, the entire template assembly, the entire template tool is a great option. And you'll be able to prep your doors and your frames using the same tool for Soss hinges. For the larger size, the hinges that are going to be meant for hanging a door, your 216, your 218, your 220, things of that nature. That's what this is going to be used for. So why don't we switch to the screen view, and then we're going to talk about all the components of this. Specifically, we're going to talk about these screws that are here and how they're removed when you're doing one prep to the next. Right now they're installed to do the body prep in here, and when you remove those, you'll be able to do the plate prep, just the faceplate. These pins that are here is what's going to allow you to put that on the edge of the door or the frame and give you the proper type of back set, so to speak. What's nice about the template is it will not permit you to violate the E dimension, the dimension from the face of the door on the pull side to where the prep starts. If you get that dimension greater than the maximum permissible, your door is not going to open. So those pins, once you put that on the door like this, on the door, and it stops, and then you nail it down, you're in a great position. This little doodad over here is what allows you to, and I don't know if I can do it with my fingers, I might have to loosen that. You flip that out, you can hang that on the edge of the door, or you wouldn't hang it, but you'd hook it on the edge of the door. And that will give you the proper distance, however you set up your template kit center to center. When you flip it back, the thickness of that piece of metal that's there is perfect to butt that up to the underside of the header and giving you that typical 1/8 inch margin that you want from the bottom of the header to the top of the door, and that's what that's for. And that covers actually everything that's on this template. There's nothing else. The way that you attach it down to the door is, again, with these trim head type screws. You'll get that nailed down is literally what you're going to do. You'll put it in place and then drive your nails down, and when you're done, you're going to pull those nails out so you can see right away. You probably don't want to sink them all the way down into the door just to keep the template steady. And if you're doing a kit, you'll have 6 or possibly 8 nails holding everything on. What you don't want to do, obviously, if this is my door, you don't want to rock it back and forth. You don't want to get that on there and then force that to rock, because it'll work not only the nails loose, but your template, you're rocking it back and forth, so your bit is literally moving like this. So you don't want to mess up your prep. Just get it placed, because routers are heavy and you just want to move it along the top, because this is not going to sit most likely flat on the edge of the door. It might be at a 3-degree bevel. So be mindful that you're going to want the base to stay absolutely parallel to the face of the template. And as you're routing, you're going to be just careful to not try to remove too much wood in one pass. That could cause splintering of wood. It could cause the router to jump and you'll hit your template, possibly knock it out of place a little bit. So nice and slow. But these templates are really handy because they're inexpensive, and while you can prep for Soss hinges using a hole saw and a hammer and a chisel, it's not going to look as nice as this, and this is super easy. And You don't have to measure the height once you have the center to center of the individual template set, nor do you have to worry about the E dimension. And I'll show you what the E dimension is on a template. Let's switch to the screen view now. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. Let's dive into this fairly deep now. The 216 IT. We have some extended description information here. Before we do that, let's look at the images that we have. There's the box, the contents of the box. Showing you the template. That is the business end of where you're going to prep with your router. That's the end, showing you the jam or the backset pins, and then your shim and your hook. Showing the what would end up being the underside. Well, you know, whatever hand it's going to be, it doesn't really matter. But just showing a different view. How those screw heads, and you're going to need to remove those on every hinge prep, the 2 nails. The bottom line is the pins are in, and you're going to do the body prep first, the deep prep, and then you'll remove those to do just the faceplate prep. These drywall screws act basically as a limiter to keep you from setting that router bit to where it doesn't belong. So let's look at the extended description. Soss invisible hinges can now be installed easier and faster than ever before. Each guide template is individually handcrafted for exactness. The template is held onto the door and jammed with nails. Guide pins locate the deep mortise. The guide pins are those 2 drywall screws. The edges of the template assure a perfect outline when used with Soss RGB 100 template guide and lock nut, or their Porter cable or the Porter cable template guide 42024, and this lock nut. And the 1/2-inch diameter router bit. You're going to absolutely have to have the right guide and the right router bit to do this, which happen to be linked right here. And I'll explain why you must have the router guide and the proper size bit when the proper size router guide and the proper size bit when you're doing this. This is a older video from Soss. I don't know when. It's probably 20 years old would be my guess, if not older. And you can review that. So let's take a look at the cut sheet. This is going to be out of the catalog and is not going to provide you too much shocking data, but is a good overview of what it is that we're dealing with. So what we have is the router guide templates and template system. For these 10 or so hinge models, you can get the router guide template for. We're doing the 216, giving you an idea of what it looks like when you're using it. Those nails, as you can tell, are not all the way in, and that machining that's been done, the mortising that's been done, allows you to stick that template inside of the aluminum channel that allows you to connect the different units together in a very ingenious way also. So these are the part numbers for the different router templates. This is an overview of everything that we've talked about up here. This is what the entire kit looks like when it's assembled, regardless if you're doing a 212, a 216, or whatever. Allows you to set the positioning exactly how you'll want it and how you'll need it to prep for these doors, prep for doors and frames for these hinges. You can purchase the entire router guide system by these part numbers. So if you get a 218, let's say a 216 RG3, you're going to be able to prep the 216 and the 416 hinge. I believe the 416 is fire rated. We'll look at that. And you'll get 3 templates. You will get 3 templates. You will get the aluminum channels. You'll get the ability to connect them together. You'll get the ability to then take that assembled unit and put it onto the door and then shift it over to the frame and prep for 3 hinges and 6 different operations, actually 12 different operations. That's what it looks like. And these are your part numbers for the entire kit. If you're doing taller doors that require 4 hinges, you can get the RG4 model. Actually, it would have to add a channel. It would probably have to add the center section and then another channel as far as I'm concerned, because you're going to need to tailor that onto the door. Well, you'd need the inner aluminum angle, I believe that is, and then another channel. Now, we talked about the router bits that you're going to need, and they're linked to in this video, but the catalog here is going to tell you which bit you need to buy. And either buy this bit from us at the time you're buying the tool, or just make sure that you get them elsewhere or have them. So for the 216, you're going to need the router bit 51310, or also said a 1/2 inch, 3 1/4 inch length router bit. 2-flute carbide, but the 51310 is the bit that's been tested and found completely compatible and engineered with this system. So with this, you're going to need the proper router guide bushing and lock nut, which means the OD of the guide is going to have to be 3/4 inch. If it's not 3/4 inch, or if your router bit is not 1/2 inch, you're going to be able to make this prep, but it won't be the right size. If your collet is too small, that's bad, because you're prepping too large in the door and frame, meaning your router guide. If that's too small, you're going to create a prep too large. I had a client call me one time and say, yeah, he had bought the template kit for me in RG3, maybe a 218 RG3, but didn't buy the router guide bushing. And by the way, the lock nut just holds it into the base. Nor did he buy the router bit. And he called and says, yeah, everything's great. And I prepped everything, but I tried to put the first hinge in and it will fit, but it's really tight. Like he had to hammer it in with a rubber mallet. And I looked at his order and realized, well, he didn't buy the router bit and he didn't buy the guide. And I questioned him about that. And he said, yeah, no, I already had that stuff. And I said, we'll do this, get a caliper and let's measure the router bit. And he called me back and said, okay, I measured the router bit, and I told him what it had to be. The router bit was 1/2 inch, but his guide was too large, which meant the hole that he was achieving was too small. And that's what he had to swap out. We had to overnight him the right router guide bushing. He swapped that out, and he was perfect. Home free from there. Home free. Everything worked out perfectly. Now, I mentioned that E dimension a couple of times. By the way, links to that information here, to the bit and the router guide bushing. I talked about this E dimension. Let's get a Soss 216 template pulled up, and then we're going to look at what you're prepping. Let's look at this first. So this is what you're going to try to prep. You're not going to try to. You're going to do it successfully without any trouble at all. And here's that template. So first of all, don't let a Soss template intimidate you. They're all bark and no bite. Once you understand them, they are really all bark and no bite. So the E dimension is 1/4 inch for this hinge. The E dimension is defined as the edge of the hinge to the edge of the door from the pull side. If you go larger than that, that means that the gap between the door and the jamb will be insufficient to allow the door to actually rotate. Here is their clearance detail file, and that will help understand it even better. Let's pretend that all of this is just door. This is the E dimension from here to here. If that dimension is greater than 1/4 inch, you can, in your mind's eye, imagine how it's not going to fit. And it's going to basically give you this scenario. So if the E dimension is greater than 1/4 inch, you can see, because of how sharp that or tight that margin is, you're not going to be able to get that door to open very far at all before you have a problem. If you're going to 90 degrees only and you violate the E dimension, well, you could probably make that work if you put a miter on it, but you're not going to go past 90, not without damaging the door and frame. So that's the pesky E dimension. As long as you don't violate that, you're not going to have a problem. Well, it turns out with the template, like I said earlier, with those pins, you can't violate that E dimension. But as you can see by looking at this, what are we really dealing with? Well, when I look at a piece of hardware in terms of prepping for it, I'm always thinking in terms of what's the body dimension and what's the plate dimension. And that comes from learning how to program a CNC tool for prepping hardware. Well, the body dimension is this. Just this. It's 2 and 1930 seconds by 1 and 1530 seconds. So I know I got to prep this. Once I've got that, well, and then the width, of course, which they're going to give you basically here. It's 1 inch. Once I've got that, then I'm going to do the entire plate, which is going to be, they don't show it here, but here it is, 4 5/8. Again, 1 inch wide. And then the thickness is 1530 seconds. And then I prep for this. The template's going to give me this radius that I'm going to need. I'm looking on the template to see where that radius is called out. Well, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Of course it's ½ inch. It's ½ inch because the width is 1 inch. That has to be half. It doesn't have to be ½ inch, but it is. And when you prep this hinge accordingly, you're going to have that 15/16 of an inch clearance when the door is brought to 180 degrees. Now, if you had the entire RG3 or the RG4, we'd be able to look at doing the entire kit, but at the end of the day, it's really not necessary to look at the entire kit because that's a different video, is the bottom line. But suffice it to say, with the entire kit, you're basically going to simply attach the individual templates together in the location that the factory wants them to be installed in. And by the way, I'm back at the router template. I clicked on template instructions. So this is going to be an overview of the entire, of the template itself, and is going to talk to you about the entire installation kit as well. So just scanning this, it's going to tell you what you need up at the top for the router guide and the lock nut and what size it needs to be, and obviously you already know that you need a ½ inch router bit. So what you'll notice here is they're basically showing you how to pop this onto the top of the door. Spacer tab extended. You get that flush to the top of the door. You get your locator pins sucked up tight to the face of the door. You nail it down, and then you have at it. The guide pins go in, you do the body prep first. The guide pins come out, and you do the plate prep. All that you've got to really worry about is making sure that your depth is correct. That's what you have to do. Well, you have to make sure that the top of the door to the center line and the underside of the header to the center line are compatible. If one is 8 inch, the other can't be 8 inch. So if the top of the door to the center line of the first hinge is 10 inch, the underside of the header to the center line of the first hinge has to be 10 1/8. But this spacer does all that work for you. You don't have to measure it. If you were to literally take one template and put it to the top of the door and then prep it, you would just take that same template and push it tight to the underside of the header, and your spacing will be completely accurate. It's kind of what you're going to look like in a cross section. And these table references will tell you your size for the hinge that you're working on. 2/16, let's see. Yeah, you'll have to go back and forth, but you'll get all the data. The 2/16 takes 1.5 inch deep mortise. I think the faceplate's 15-30 seconds. Now you'll notice here that they want to see 2 hinges at the top and 1 at the bottom, and that's because 70% of the door weight is hung by that top hinge. Before you prep everything, I would make sure that the manufacturer of the doors and frames are okay with you locating your hanging devices in such a place, but I can't believe it would be a problem. You might want to check, though, on the warranty of the door. Jam preparation, you know, I've already said it. I'm looking at this. I've already said all the words. Starter hole, ½ inch. So they're going to want you to drill a starter hole in the hinge cavity, which is this dash line, because you're not going to be able to stick your router down into a hole that you've not drilled. So drill a ½ inch starter hole, and you'll be able to prep all of that. So you're going to ½ inch starter hole, then you're going to make this prep, and then you're going to make this prep. I'll show you where the nomograph is so you can see where these locations come up. And if you're going to buy one template and you're going to buy, let's say, 3 hinges and a router bit and a router guide, a router base guide, all that you have to do is measure the top of the door to the center of each hinge and then the other side of the header to the center of each hinge. You're going to add 1/8 of an inch for the frame dimension. Your locator pin will do everything. So you can do everything you need to do with just one template. And you may have no need at all to buy the entire kit and caboodle because you're going to do one door and and you expect to never do another one. So you could certainly do that. And if it was me and I knew I was doing it once, I would probably buy one template rather than the entire kit, is what I would do. That's what it looks like assembled, coming off the frame or the jamb. I don't want to read the instructions because I feel like I've given a summary of everything. You can go through and read that, and you will pick out any nuances that I've glossed over or mentioned incorrectly and whatnot. But it's very simple and straightforward. There's a link below this video as seen here to the manufacturer's page. right here. When you click on that, you're going to be able to pull up not only all of the Soss products that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation as seen here, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the product catalog here. I mentioned a nomograph. Here it is. Standard Hinge usage nomograph. I was referring to the nomograph while showing you the hinge spacing. So hinge location, that's a document that will tell you where to place the hinges based on your quantity of hinges. You know, I would follow your standard door rules. For doors up to 60 inch, you'll have 2 hinges. For every 30 inch thereafter, add an additional hinge. What that formula doesn't do is tell you where to locate them. It's assumed that you're going to basically evenly space them, but when it comes to Soss, they're going to want to see you biasing the quantity of hinges towards the top of the door. Which is where the majority of weight is. Now the nomograph, the question becomes is, hey, which hinge do I use? And that starts with the nomograph. The nomograph basically tells you which hinge to use and how many to use based on the width of the door and the weight of the door. So you follow along with this example. If we have a 3-foot wide door, which is going to be down at about here, and it's going to weigh 150 pounds, we're just going to follow that straight across. We're going to hit here and then go straight across. And you can see we're in this area. If it's an 1.75" door, and then your door thickness comes into play. If it's an 1.75" thick door, the right hinge to use, the best one is the 218, and you'll use 3 of them. Okay? So they're really not going about determining the quantity of hinges based on height as much as the width and the weight. Because the width is what's going to really cause the wear and tear on that top hinge. If you have a door, just in your mind's eye, imagine a door that's 200 pounds, but it's only 6 inch wide. You're not putting a lot of stress on that top hinge. You've got a 200-pound door that is now 4 foot wide. You can reason in your mind's eye how that top hinge is really going to be pulled out of the opening because of the width of that door. So that's why they're biasing hinges towards the top of the door, and that's why they're not going on height. They're talking about width and then obviously weight. Door thickness is next. Don't put a 220 on an 1.75" thick door. It's the wrong hinge. There's also a nomograph for their Hercules hinges. If you get obscenely heavy doors, maybe a bookcase, and you need to hang something that's 1,000 pounds, guess what? Soss can do it. They can get you to 1,000 pound. It's going to be a lot of hinges, but they can do it. A massive hinge. Back to that first nomograph, they get out to potentially doors that are 500 pounds. You know, if you've got a 3-foot door that's 500 pounds, well, that's going to be off the chart. You're going to need to be in a more narrow, you're really not going to get to 500 pounds on a normal door. Let's say a 3-foot door, you might be able to hang something that's 350 pounds. I'm not, getting right to the top of this. 4 hinges, 218s. The point of the matter is, Soss hinges can handle very heavy doors. I've personally been the door supplier and the person who was behind the scenes making sure everything would work with a 4090 14 gauge hollow metal door that had 12 gauge stainless laminated on both sides of the door, hung that on Soss hinges. I've also done a job where we had a 30, 70, 18 gauge metal door, maybe 16 gauge, with 3/4 inch granite laminated to one side, hung that on Soss hinges. Not a problem at all. Heavy, heavy, heavy stuff. The rest of the documents that are on here are either catalogs or they're informational, encyclopedic references, and I would suggest that you review it. There's also a nomograph for their wide throw hinges. They're wide throw in the sense that they do allow you to contend with a special clearance issue. That would be like a 518 IT. Here's a nomograph for the wide throws, and let's just look at the 518, actually not IT, Soss 518. Let's look at that wide throw hinge just because I've brought it up. You can take a look and see what it's meant to contend with. That's what it's meant to contend with. When you're applying molding to a door because you want to make that door invisible and you're applying trim so that you remove the sight line, the wide throw hinge will kick it out to that B dimension so that you can actually get the door to open, because it does in a way violate the E dimension in the sense that if you were to install a normal hinge here, it wouldn't open because, well, your E-dimension is absolutely violated because it's here to here in that case. That wide throw hinge allows you to contend with that. We do stock these. People are calling asking for the wide throw version of Soss, relatively new as well. Let's wrap up this video on camera. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, if you have any questions on the Soss 216 IT template or any other Soss product, please feel free to reach out to us. I'm partial to Soss hinges because, well, people either love them or they're scared of them. No in between, I have found. The people that love them got over the being scared of part. The scared of crowd are those people that have said, oh gosh, I don't think I can do that. It's too hard. The template's too complex. Like I said, all bark and no bite with a Soss hinge. I remember the first time that I had to prep for one, and I looked at the template, and within 90 seconds I said, I don't know what all the fuss is. The height, whatever you're prepping, you have to get the height correct. You can't put the deadbolt at 48 inch off the floor and the strike at 49 inch off the floor. You got to get that right. You got to get the back set right when you're doing a lock. You got to get the bore right, the bore size right. A Soss is going to be, don't violate the E-dimension. It's going to be the body prep. It's going to be the plate prep. You got to get the depth of each prep correct. You got to get the top to the center correct. Easy stuff. A Soss hinge, they've been around for decades. We've hung, as I said, very heavy items with that. I had a customer about 2 years ago call and say, I got a defective Soss hinge. Now, I've been selling Soss for 30 plus years. I've never heard those words. I've heard those words just used individually and not in that sequence. I've never heard I have a defective Soss hinge. I've never heard them used together in that exact sequence. While I pressed the client for more information, turns out it was a bookcase that they hung with maybe 208 smaller hinges. There was no problem with the bookcase until the two children climbed up and sat on top of the bookcase and literally bent the hinge. If I could make my fingers go like that. Guy walked in with the bent hinge, and I says, oh yeah, it's not defective. You put 200 pounds on a bookcase up on the top with a hinge that was too small to begin with. So it was just a laugh that, okay, the record of 0 defects stands on. A lot of people will migrate towards, a lot of people don't even use Soss. They use the multi-axis adjustable hinges by other manufacturers. Tectus, Sugatsuni, McKinney, or someone else for sure. But those are the three. Tectus, Simon's work, Tectus, that's the one you hear about all the time. Soss has said we will never make a multi-axis adjustable hinge where you can adjust it laterally, you can adjust the inset, you can also adjust it vertically. And I understand why they say that. And I agree. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. This hinge isn't going to move. If you prep it in the right location, you never need to adjust it. We have used Soss hinges on extremely high-profile retail locations that have been in use for years and years and years. The door hasn't moved at all. The multi-adjustable axis hinges, I'm personally concerned that it's a maintenance problem down the road because I don't want the fitting of my door in the jamb to be dependent on some Loctite that's been dripped on mechanical screws. I'm suspect of it. Now, I've spoken to people who use it all the time, and for 10 years they've had hinges installed, never once a callback for adjustment. Okay, granted, I tip my cap to you. But when I can sell you a Soss hinge for $60 and that same thing in a adjustable hinge is over $200, I'm going to argue for Soss every time. Advocating on behalf of the owner in terms of a budget, do you really need the adjustability when you're tripling the cost of your hanging device? Anyway, I'm a fan of Soss. I hope that comes through. If you have any questions on the 216 IT or any other Soss product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.